Morning, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you and fantastic to see a full room. As Tommy indicated, I'm going to be talking about a subject that's particularly close to my heart. It's a book that I've written that comes out in March called Disruption Doesn't Knock. And a big component of really the last 6 weeks for me has been the number of people who've actually asked me, Abdullah, who's the new president of Venezuela? And I said, I'm not entirely sure, but let's talk about, so what does that mean? And now, what do we do about it? And so I'm going to talk about the next 12 to 18 months being about what I often say being the whiplash era. And very importantly, the resultant institutional drag. The reality is that we live in a world of turbulence. And many people think that turbulence is episodic. It's not. It's become quite permanent. More important for me is the fact, as Peter Drucker beautifully puts it when he says, the greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence. It's the inability to act with new logic. And so for me, a big component is to actually look at turbulence from a period of opportunity. What opportunity does turbulence give us at a macro level from the countries that we're operating in? What opportunities does turbulence give us in terms of the organizations we work for and the sectors we work in? And most importantly, how do we as individual leaders respond to turbulence? And so a big component is really this ability to appreciate that we don't live in a narrow lens. We live in a hyper-connected, interconnected type of world that allows us to be able to say, how do we build strategy? So as Tommy indicated, I help companies build strategy. And so I've really spent lots of time building a framework that is particularly important. The first one is this ability when we talk with companies to say that we must understand the external environment. Not from a hype, not from the trends that are out there, but really understanding what's the canvas we're painting on. Because the canvas we're painting on determines the colors that we're going to use, which is the S of this framework. That's what the canvas, not historically but forward-looking, looks like. What spaces does it open up for us as organizations? Where do we play? How do we win within this environment? And so a few months ago, I spent some time, and coincidentally with Vodacom World, with a German telco company. Telco companies for 25 years printed money. They had 2 printing machines, voice and data. The reality is those printing machines have either died or are dying because we're no longer making voice calls. We're using voice over IP in the form of WhatsApp calling, and so they've been disintermediated. We use lots of optionality in terms of data. It doesn't mean that they cease to exist. It means that they have to find new ways, new spaces to play in. And so the E of this framework says, what's the environment? The S is what spaces does it give us in terms of where we play and how we win. More importantly, we have to look at the C of this framework, which is the capabilities. What capabilities do we need to play in the new spaces, not the historical spaces? Do we have these capabilities? Do we need to develop and acquire them? And most importantly, with almost every one of my clients, I often say, are you doing too much? Is there too much? Because strategy is not about adding stuff. Sometimes it's about taking stuff away. But at the heart of strategy is the central question of attributes. For every organization, every company, every decision we take, we have to ask this question. On the one hand, how do we increase the willingness to pay? Why would an individual or an organization be willing to pay for your products or your services in comparison to any one of the other competitors that are out there? So I often ask the question, who competes with Woolies? And people say to me, Abdullah, perhaps Checkers. You would never have said that 4 years ago. So Woolies was never a food business. They were, dare I say, a mediocre clothing business. There was no country road in the mid-2000s. They understood the environment is changing. They decided we're going to play and win in terms of food because people are upwardly mobile. They built the capabilities, which, by the way, is completely different to food, and they increased the willingness to pay. The willingness to pay is you go to Woolies for quality. You go to Woolies for consistency. You go to Woolies because you marvel at somebody packing a black bag and now a white bag in a particularly beautiful way. You go to Woolies because you get tin roof ice cream and chuckles in everything that you can imagine. And Checkers comes in, and Checkers fundamentally challenges that by increasing the willingness to pay. What do? They create their own house brands that you're willing to pay for. They create 60/60 that delivers stuff in a seamless, frictionless way. They built a beautiful platform that allows you to buy everything from pet food to pharmaceutical products. And so at the heart of your business in strategy is the central question, how do I increase the willingness to pay? And then finally, and very importantly, we have to run organizations in an ambidextrous way. As Mark Johnson beautifully puts it, in a world of disruption, You have to do present forward thinking. What is it that we do? How do we sustain this continually and incrementally of an existing paradigm? But at the same time, we have to think from a future best perspective. How do we discontinuous the sector that we're working in? How do we develop a new paradigm? And most importantly, how do we build organizations that are infused with the oxygen of imagination, of creativity, and businesses that fundamentally don't respond to disruption, but actually become the disruptors in their sector? Thank you so much.